Hello, good morning and welcome back to Talking Planning. I have got the biggest coffee I could find, which is great for today, and I'd like to talk about another actually talking planning style topic. And I think today it's worth having a look at heritage. So come and join me. This is Talking Planning. So what I find really interesting about heritage is it's not this static idea that old buildings only get heritage listed. The truth is modern buildings can be heritage listed, and it really depends on what makes that building unique and satisfies the criteria of each individual state's heritage legislation. So at first I thought that building behind me may have actually been heritage listed, but it turns out it isn't, and it is getting a pretty serious makeover in the coming few years, so it's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like when it's done, because it's a very interesting piece of 1970s brutalist design which some people absolutely love. Me, yeah, not so much, but you know, it's got some sort of unusual charm to it, so it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like when it's finished. So as I was thinking about making this video, I did a little bit of a scroll through on the New South Wales State Heritage Register, putting Newcastle local government area in, and it came up as 51 listed results and about, I think, 980 individual heritage items. So those are quite different, and can I just say, that's quite a lot. So definitely, from a planning perspective, make sure you check your heritage register before you start any construction work, or when you start thinking about lodging any plans, because you don't want to make that mistake and not realise there's something there before you get going. But anyway, I think it's quite interesting to see what heritage items there are around here, and I think it's worth delving into more deeply what really makes an item eligible for heritage. I don't want to go too much into the legislation, but more around the principles, because when you change states or even cities or regions, what kind of constitutes a heritage item is up for variation, and people have their own ideas on what heritage should be. I mean, for example, some people think that they should have their own house heritage listed because they might be a famous person. There are people out there who think unique retail opportunities, also by the way, cool Varley fire truck, there are a lot of people who think unique heritage should be protected in the form of retail trade and business types. And there's all sorts of oddities and ideas that people have about heritage, so I think it's important to just sort of keep that in mind, because it's a very touchy subject politically and socially as well. So something I really want to point out in today's video about heritage is it is a very personal thing, and for the most part lots of people have opinions on heritage. Sometimes we can agree to disagree, sometimes we are very fond of heritage. Hang on, crunchy leaves coming right up. And sometimes heritage to others just isn't a big deal. But I don't think it's a conversation topic which people are generally that neutral about. Most people have a vested opinion, which is interesting, but that makes the understanding of heritage and the assessment of heritage quite difficult, and something that particularly local governments and state governments have to tread very carefully on. So I think now let's have a look at some examples of what is heritage, what isn't heritage, and how you can incorporate modern designs into heritage items in a sensitive and interesting way. So I got my camera out and I went for a bit of a wander around town to take some photos. Let's see what is heritage listed and what isn't. As I previously said, this brutalist former council building is not heritage listed, but there are buildings of similar age and design around the world that are. Maybe it's because it was home to an important meeting, the design or construction of this building is special, or the site holds significance amongst an Indigenous population. It's really important to bust the myth that heritage listing just means old, so let's have a look at a few buildings around town now. Let's start with Newcastle's Civic Theatre, built in 1929. This is definitely heritage listed and is a key part of the entertainment district of this city. Pop around the corner, and Newcastle City Hall, also finished in 1929, is listed, with its bold design finished in sandstone. Even the New South Wales Heritage Register alludes to the building's similarity to Brisbane City Hall, which was finished a year later. Let's move on to a building which has two lists, a heritage list and a blacklist. The latter is one you can join after a particularly rowdy evening. Argyle House, formerly Fanny's Tavern, was built in the 1860s and added to over the years, but more recently has been converted into a nightclub, so you can celebrate heritage with your homies over a few brewskis. And after that awful attempt at trying to be cool, let's talk about some transport-related heritage. Newcastle's former train station and the station master's residence are listed, along with the Premier's and Railway Commissioner's railcar collection at Broadmeadow. So everything I've talked about so far, and more, is directly listed under the Heritage Act. But in addition, local and state agencies can list items, and there are close to 1,000 items in Newcastle or related to Newcastle alone listed there. Let's start with Civic Park, which is just across the road from City Hall. This park is listed as a heritage item under Newcastle's Local Environmental Plan 2012 and is on the National Trust of Australia register. Since there are another 950-ish items to talk about, I won't be going through any more of them today, but let's see how you can find out whether heritage might be a consideration that you need to keep in mind. State by state, the processes will differ, but most council websites will help point you in the right direction. In the case of the City of Perth, it did require an archaeological dig to reach the heritage section. Other websites, however, make it a little bit clearer to find, like the City of Melbourne, or the City of Adelaide, or even the City of Brisbane, where heritage was only a couple of clicks away. So what I want to talk about now is incorporating heritage into things. So one of the things that makes heritage difficult is it costs a lot of money to maintain and restore heritage items, and unfortunately this can be a massive barrier to the actual maintenance, preservation and upkeep of heritage. So what you will often find are proposals which plan to open heritage items up, which involve some modifications and changes. Things like building dining areas in, it's just started raining, of course it has. Only always does that when you start filming, right? So where I'm standing right now on this deck, I should be clear, I'm actually not sure if this is listed. I'll have to check once I've finished filming and you'll see whether it is or it isn't down below. But apart from the port behind me, this area here is planning to open up as a restaurant sometime late this year, but given the fact I don't see much construction happening, I'm not so sure about the validity of that. But what is good is there's also like park and public space behind me as well, which does help provide a nice backdrop for these sorts of buildings. So I think it would be great to see this open up for somewhere to enjoy and somewhere to appreciate. So fingers crossed it goes ahead. Of course, in addition to listed items, you may also find some other heritage conservation measures. In New South Wales, you can find heritage conservation areas by searching your council's LEP maps. In Queensland, you may find character overlays in your city plan or planning scheme, and other states and territories will have some form of heritage or character protection measures in planning documents. In New South Wales, an AHIMS search, that is an Aboriginal Heritage Information Management System search, is always a wise idea, and of course,
Don't start any work until all of your approvals are ready.
Alrighty, so it is a few days later now, but I do want to say when it comes to heritage and character, it's really important to do your due diligence because there are lots of different restrictions depending on where you are, and if you don't, it can get rather expensive and you can spend lots of time and money in the Planning Environment Court, Land and Environment Court, or whatever your local state or territory equivalent is. So, I cannot stress this enough. Make sure you do your due diligence before you start any building or construction work, and make sure all your approvals are in order. And with that very pertinent point discussed, I want to say thank you for joining me. I will see you again soon.